Hey everybody, it's Matt Shares, CEO of SBI, coming to you with another update from the Revenue Growth Help Desk. And I've been fortunate enough to have a good friend and a longtime client of SBI, Steve Blum from Autodesk, join me today because Steve and I caught up last week and he had some great insights. So Steve, why don't I let you introduce yourself and Autodesk to the audience, and then we'll get started.
You got it. Thanks, Matt. And hi, everybody. Welcome to my home office. As I'm sure most of us are working in our home offices or in a shelter-in-place environment, we are here in the Dallas area. So I'm Steve Blum, and I'm Senior Vice President of Worldwide Field Operations for Autodesk. So I'm basically responsible for all of the customer-facing functions that we have, driving the business for Autodesk in 175 countries around the world. Autodesk is a software company. We focus on developing software that our customers use to design and make pretty much anything from manufactured products to buildings, highways, any infrastructure projects, even movies and video games in the media and entertainment business. So we're a 38-year-old software company, but we're actually growing like a startup company. And up until this virus hit, having a lot of fun. Now we're actually managing through having fun during a challenging time.
Well, you know, and Steve, one of the reasons why I thought you would be such a thoughtful guest is the perspective that you had. And you and I have been doing this for a long time, and we're on the older side as compared to many of the 20-somethings that both work in my organization. Yeah, exactly. I have none, and yours is great. So we've been experimenting, and I know many people in our ecosystem have been experimenting with virtual connectivity and virtual management. And there's a lot of people that weren't working in 08, 09, like you and I were. They weren't working in 01. Right? They weren't working in 99 in the .com, so they haven't lived through this crisis. And you made a couple of really salient points when you and I caught up last week, and I thought it was so appropriate that we would share it with the ecosystem. So I guess, Steve, maybe as a way of getting started, something you mentioned to me was around connectivity and how Autodesk, with your thousands of employees, but thousands of sellers, channel partners, multi-tier channel, how you're creating connectivity and paying attention to that. So maybe as a way of opening up, you could just talk a little bit about how you view that with the size of your remit.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're focusing on so many operational elements, and what we're realizing and what I'm realizing is there's a lot of attention that's required on our people. Folks are going through a tough time right now, and depending upon where they are around the world, they're in a different cycle of the process. If they're in China, they're in a different space than if they're in Italy, or if they're in Germany, or here in the United States. And a realization that people are people. Our companies are made up of people, and people are dealing with work-related issues and family-related issues and customer-related issues all at the same time. We went to a work-from-home environment, and ensuring that teams felt like they were still part of a team. You know, we have a lot of inside sales teams that show up at an office and they really have a great team environment, and they do a lot of things to stay connected as a team, and a lot of hallway conversations. There's a lot of coffee breaks. There's a lot of team activities. In many parts of the world now, folks are not only working from home, but they're in countries where they're mandated that they can barely leave their home. They can barely leave to go get groceries or to go out and go to get to the pharmacy or a doctor. And so we've been focusing on how do we retain the team feeling and have a feeling of connection overall. And our leaders around the company have really been very creative. Almost daily now, our teams are having virtual coffee breaks. We actually we brought on some new hires, so we're still hiring through the process, and we're onboarding folks virtually and introducing them to their teams virtually. I've had some teams that have actually gone as far as they have done virtual yoga classes together, because that's what they used to do when they were off on their lunch break overall. Actually today I saw there was a picture that was posted on our Slack, one of the Slack channels, of folks that were having a virtual lunch as a team, but it was a crazy hat lunch. So everyone was in their home wearing a crazy hat. One team actually was even, they are all musicians. They like playing in bands together. So they had a virtual rap hour, and they basically were, doing their practicing and things together. So these are not necessarily work-related things, but they have an impact in the work environment because these folks want to feel like they're still part of the team. They want to have a place where they can vent and talk about what they're dealing with overall, and then get distracted on something that takes their mind away from the stresses and strains and allows them to be a person again for a while. So I'm really excited to see how our teams have stepped up, Matt, to do things that really are driving connection and having people feel like they're part of the team still.
So Steve, and you've already come with a couple of new ones you didn't have last week, so I can tell it is ever changing.
It is.
So I think something that resonated with me last week when we spoke was when you just talked about like the kind of daily stand-up motion that
Yes.
when you're in an inside role, it's very natural, right? I started in an inside call center almost 30 years ago, right? You stand up after 55 minutes, report your dials, put them on a whiteboard.
Right.
You and your team, thousands of people, have created this sort of synergistic approach of virtual on daily things, weekly things. So maybe talk a little bit about, for the sales leaders on the call, are there any couple of cadence things that you would recommend that you're seeing that you guys have tried and that are working?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we've tried to replicate the things we would do as teams and the cadence of those team meetings or check-ins virtually. We're using Zoom, and there's lots of options out there to be able to connect virtually overall. So many of our teams have those morning check-in types of calls, they basically weren't calls. They had normal meetings in the office. They're now doing them virtually overall. I found that where teams are actually co-located, but they actually work in a global capacity. So they may have actually had a team that's in one location connecting with a team in another location. They're passing who's responsible for driving the virtual meeting, perhaps adding a little bit of the fun part to make it more of a productive session because it is virtual overall. But the cadence of those get-togethers, the daily coffee breaks and things has become really important. Now we'll add this, from a leadership team perspective, I'm actually connecting with my team more. I've actually set up a couple of check-ins a week just to talk with my key leaders about what's going on in the world for them. What customer issues are they facing that we need to go help them out with? How are our partners managing through this? Because we have a large partner ecosystem, like you said, Matt, and they're actually all small businesses managing through these same types of challenges. And so we're trying to make sure they feel part of a connection to the Autodesk ecosystem, even if it's a virtual type of connection. So I'd say our cadence has increased in the number of connections we're doing virtually to try to make up for the hallway time and the other things that people probably took for granted when they were co-located, and now no longer have that opportunity to have that walk by and have that quick conversation overall. But you have to be on purpose about it. If you don't plan it, it won't happen. So you have to really think through which meetings should we do, which things should we add, and then stay committed to doing them, making them fun, and making them work.
Yeah. Steve, I love that. Couple of things that stood out to me in that answer. One was the on purpose component. I know we've seen more and more companies move to what you and I would describe as probably more of an agile that you would see in a product development team where they're doing 15-minute stand-ups. I know at SBI, we do 15-minute stand-ups in teams every day. And we talk about what you're going to do today to have a good day. What the one most important thing you had to do yesterday was, you got to have a piece of good news, and then you got to have a stuck, something you're working on that you're stuck. And those four things, 7:30 in the morning, 7:45, to your point, it creates repeatability. The second thing I loved about what you said was the sensitivity with the partners. As big as your partner network is and as small as some of those businesses, they're humans, and they're probably worried far beyond maybe the size and scale of a business like Autodesk. So anything you would share with probably more your peers who run large billion-dollar enterprises, have this massive partner ecosystem? Because I don't know if that level of empathy, Steve, has gone all the way down as perhaps you're suggesting.
Yeah, so our partners are dealing with the same types of issues we think about, we being our own separate companies, but our partners are cash flow driven businesses.
Mhm.
Our partners have been around long enough, but Matt, they've been around like you and me. Most of them, the principals, the ones that are the CEOs, they've been around doing this for a while.
Yeah.
They can still remember the challenges of the global financial crisis and how hard it was to get through those types of times. And what I'm finding is when they're in their own offices, their own microcosm, they have a tendency to see the dark, gloomy side of the scenarios. Everyone's doing scenario planning.
Yeah.
My partners seem to be focusing on the doomsday scenarios as the scenario overall. And I personally don't believe we're going to be in doomsday, but you should
Yeah.
at least understand that scenario. So we're helping them now to manage through how should they make decisions to get their businesses successfully through whatever economic headwinds we're going to have associated with this health crisis. We're also giving them tips on how to be leaders. They sometimes forget that they are leaders of their company. They know that they're owners of the businesses, but they forget that they may have 50, 100, 200, 300 people in their organizations. They're also worrying about their families, their livelihoods, their health, and other things. And they need to step up and be leaders. So we're trying to help them by sharing with them what we're doing as leaders within our organization, demonstrating and modeling it, in fact, with our partner principals so that they can then actually do that with all the folks on their teams.
I love that. I just took a note. You gave me yet another idea, so thank you for that. So, Steve, if there is, because nobody is a fortune teller relative to how long we're going to be in here, but I think there's always innovative practices relative to how you run the business, how you connect with people, these different components. If there were maybe one or two things that you think right now, because of the pandemic, that are going to be part of the new normal at Autodesk, that whether we come out of this April 17th or July 12th, you're like, as the guy who leads the entire Worldwide Field Organization, this is what we're going to do. What would a couple of those new normals be for you?
Yeah, so certainly learning to work remotely is going to have a change in the way we continue to do the new normal when we get to the point of the new normal. I think, I know even at Autodesk, we had a practice of always wanting all of our inside sales folks to always be working in the offices. I'm going to be taking a step back and saying, okay, that was my old thinking.
Yeah.
Should things change? I'm not suggesting they totally change and everyone stays at home, but I'm thinking about what are we learning going through this process that we can apply to even add more of a life or a work experience benefit to our employees that help them be more productive. So I'm certain we're going to find some ways we work that are going to change forever associated with ultimately what we're going through right now. I actually am going to be going through an interesting learning myself. Matt, you know that we do our, like many companies, we have our one big annual event at the beginning that kind of aligns everybody on strategy and where we're going, gets people motivated for the year. And what we've been doing at Autodesk is we do one large global one that includes a lot of my senior folks, my direct sales reps, not my inside reps, and our partner principals. And then we take that out on the road and do it 4 more times. So we get in front of thousands and thousands of people by doing that. We were fortunate enough, we were able to do the one large global event before this became a crisis in the US, but the 4 other events we've canceled, in person at least, and we're going to be doing them virtually. We've not ever done this virtually before. So I've told my team, let's go through 4 virtual events, see how it goes, get the feedback from our own employees and from our partners, and decide, do we go virtual going forward, or do we do more frequent check-ins in a virtual capacity that we wouldn't have considered doing before? So I'm going to try to learn as much as I can through this process. We're going through some interesting new experiences overall, and I'm certain that we're going to come away with some things that we're going to do differently that we wouldn't have considered before because we didn't have to consider them, and now we are.
Yeah, I love that. So I guess as we kind of wind into the final question, Steve, one of the things, and when we started SBI, we would speak all the time because there was just a small number of us, and we're still a small firm, but 14 years in, we've got, a few more people.
Yeah.
We're still a highly virtual, highly communicative firm relative to the daily huddles, a weekly all hands call that I run every Friday. We have a lot of communication. what I'm taking from you is communication norms are also going to be changed. So is there anything that you or Andrew at the very most senior level, as you think about just sort of traditional communication that might have been done quarterly all hands, are you changing that? Are you trying that? Because what I'm noticing is people feel the need to communicate more in a crisis, but you and I both know when you're leading an organization, whether you have a couple hundred people or 50,000, you can never communicate enough. So any advice or breakthroughs for you on that from your purview?
You know, I think for me, I've been going through a learning process, which is great. That's why I keep doing what we do, because we keep learning and finding new things to go do or better ways to do them. For me, the big takeaway so far has been less about frequency and more about style and content. I've shifted my conversations. I'm being much more personal. I'm sharing with folks what I'm going through, because what I'm going through is like everybody else. And I think when we're in challenging times like this, I have folks everywhere around the world, but they all want to know, okay, the issues they're dealing with as employees, as people, as family members, they're the same issues I'm dealing with, or Andrew's dealing with, or anyone on my leadership team is dealing with. And by recognizing that, actually, they gain more confidence in us. We're going to be doing the right things for them because we're solving our problems together. So,
Yeah.
my son's in New York, my daughter's in Chicago. I'm constantly talking with them, asking them how they're doing and the circumstances they're in and what their companies are doing. And I'm sharing those things with all of the folks on my team, and even with my partners. I'm working on a partner communication I'm going to be sending out here, sharing those types of insights as well. So I'm giving more insight to how I'm managing through things. And it's a humbling experience to actually open up and to talk about your own vulnerabilities, but I think it actually is one of the core elements of being a true, authentic leader overall. So my biggest takeaway is that style in which I'm talking is evolving and changing overall. And I think it's going to stick with me beyond when we've gotten past the impacts of the virus.
Yeah. Steve, what a great way to end this call. I would tell you the construct of vulnerability and also like paying attention to energy level, because
Yeah.
we're going through so much. And I, as recent as last night, I had a couple of conversations with a couple of my closest colleagues, and I owed a couple of people apologies because my energy level was down. It had been one of those days, and A, they didn't get the best of me, but B, I probably could have been more vulnerable. And what was great is they weren't asking how I was doing, Matt, the CEO. They were asking how Matt Scherer's, father, guy, brother, son was doing. And you're right
Yes.
about it. Great, great reminder and great coaching. All right, everybody. Well, that was super helpful from Steve. Steve, as always, you always have great things to share. Continued success to you and the Autodesk team by lean on the bleeding edge, not only with your results, but also with your humanity. It's one of the reasons why I think you and I have developed such a great fondness. So much appreciated from our community. And to those of you that are watching and listening, Steve gave us some great takeaways around connectivity, around vulnerability, and that sense of community, and try to operate as much as you can, but take some of these virtual learnings and make them regular operating norms as we move forward. So until next time, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you all along the way.